The listening post hung at the edge of explored space like a forgotten coin, half swallowed by the dark. For 2,000 years it had spun in silence, sweeping the void for whispers, and for 2,000 years it had heard nothing worth waking the Empire over. Junior technician Veltka was 3 months into a 6-year posting and already losing track of which day was which. The station's interior smelled of recycled breath and burnt copper. Somewhere down the corridor, a maintenance drone was singing the same broken tune it had sung for a century. She had stopped hearing it weeks ago. Then the console chirped, a small, almost apologetic sound, and her stylus froze above her log. Signal, coherent, modulated, origin, an uncharted system in the Orion Spur. Veltka leaned forward, her 4 eyes narrowing. The signal was crude radio waves, primitive electromagnetic noise, the kind of leakage a species shed when it first crawled out of its cradle. The Empire's archives had a name for such systems: infants. They were catalogued, monitored from a distance, and ignored for 10,000 years until they either destroyed themselves or grew interesting. But this signal was strange. It wasn't one transmission. It was millions. Layered, overlapping, frantic, music, voices, mathematics, war declarations and love songs and equations and screams, all bleeding into the void at once. As if the species sending it could not stop talking, could not bear silence, could not be contained. She ran the standard analysis. The system had a single inhabited world, small, blue, ringed by a thin band of orbital debris that suggested rapid, chaotic industrialization. The dominant life form appeared bipedal, soft-bodied, alarmingly fragile. Lifespan barely a century. Population 9 billion and climbing. Technological age estimated 120 standard years from first powered flight. Veltka almost laughed. 120 years. Her own species had taken 11,000 years to reach the same threshold. She tagged the signal, filed it under curiosities, low priority, and sent it up the chain expecting nothing. 3 rotations later, the reply came back stamped in black. Imperial reconnaissance dispatched. She stared at the order for a long time. The Empire did not dispatch reconnaissance to curiosities. The Empire dispatched reconnaissance to threats. The scout ship Talon of Veth left dock the next cycle. Veltka watched its drive flare on the long-range scope, a small green ember vanishing into the dark. The Empire would have its answer in 9 days. 9 days became 12. 12 became 20. On the 21st day, the Talon of Veth did not return. It did not transmit a distress beacon. It did not vanish into the gravitational shear of a rogue star. It simply went quiet, the way a candle goes quiet, and the silence it left behind was the loudest thing Veltka had ever heard. She pulled up the small blue world on her screen and stared at it. From this distance, it was nothing, a single pixel, trembling slightly with atmospheric distortion. A nothing world, a nursery world, a world too young to have learned how to kill. And yet, behind her, the maintenance drone had stopped singing. The corridor was perfectly, unnaturally still. Veltka realized her hands were trembling, and she could not say why. Somewhere in the deep archives of the Empire, an automated protocol stirred. A name was unsealed. A dormant fleet, mothballed for centuries, began the slow process of waking. And in the throne chamber on the Imperial homeworld, 300 light-years away, Emperor Vaskarun, scourge of 900 worlds, lifted his ancient head from his hand and asked the question that would shape the next decade of galactic history. "What," he said softly, "is a human?" The whisper of core arrived in the Sol system with its drives cold and its hull painted in light-eating black. Captain Drevan had been hand-picked for stealth work. He had spent 40 years watching primitive species from orbit and had never been seen by any of them. He intended to keep that record intact. He found the wreckage of the Talon of Veth before he found anything else. It was tumbling slowly through the orbit of the third planet's moon, gutted, its hull peeled open like fruit. Imperial scouts were not supposed to be peelable. The Talon had carried armor rated against capital-grade weaponry, and yet someone had opened it the way a child opens a shell to see what was inside. Drevan ordered full passive scan and a complete blackout of all emissions. Then he turned his sensors on the blue world below. What he saw, he could not at first understand. The humans were everywhere, not just on the surface, though the surface crawled with them, light swarming across continents in patterns too dense to map, but above it. Stations, telescopes, listening arrays, a loose net of orbital structures, ramshackle and asymmetrical and clearly built by a species that could not yet agree on a single standard for anything. There were flags on the moon. There were flags on the next planet. Tiny, bright filaments of human stubbornness already reaching, already climbing. This was not an infant species. This was something else. He ran the historical models on the species' broadcast records, the ones the Talon had managed to compile before it died. The Empire's analysts had flagged certain patterns as anomalous, and Drevan now understood why. Humans had a peculiar habit. When a thing tried to kill them, they did not run from it. They studied it. They named it. They built monuments to the people it had killed, and then they hunted the thing down and used its bones as material. They had done this to predators. They had done this to plagues. They had done this, Drevan noted with a cold tightening behind his eyes, to each other repeatedly for the entirety of their recorded history. They were a species that had spent 10,000 years sharpening itself against itself, and the Empire had assumed the wars meant they were weak. The wars meant the survivors were practiced. Drevan was halfway through composing his report when the alarm sounded. 3 human craft were rising from the surface. They were small, ugly, asymmetrical, and they were coming directly toward his ship at an angle no random patrol would have chosen. They had not detected him. They could not have detected him. The Whisper of Core was the most sophisticated stealth platform the Empire had ever built. And yet, they were coming. He ordered full, silent retreat. The drives hummed. The stars began to slide. The human craft accelerated. They did not match his vector, they anticipated it, slipping into a pursuit curve as if they had read his mind, as if his every evasive thought had already been a footprint in fresh snow. He pushed harder. They pushed harder. And then, with a casual elegance that made Drevan feel suddenly and terribly old, one of the human craft launched a single small projectile that crossed the gap in seconds and embedded itself in his hull without exploding. A boarding spike! He had time before the breach to record one final entry into the ship's log. His hands shook. His voice did not. "They knew we were here," he said. "They knew from the moment we entered the system. I do not know how, I do not know what they used, but I believe the Talon was not destroyed by accident. I believe the humans wanted us to send another. They wanted one of us alive." The breach charge blew. Atmosphere screamed. Figures in heavy armor came through the smoke, smaller than him, slower than him, weaker in every measurable way, and yet they moved with the awful certainty of beings who had done this before, who had been born doing this, whose entire evolutionary inheritance was the art of taking one more step than the thing trying to stop them. The last thing Captain Drevan saw was a human face behind a transparent visor. It was not snarling, it was not triumphant, it was curious, and it was smiling. Emperor Vaskarun watched the recording of Drevan's final transmission 17 times in a single night. He sat alone in his throne chamber, the great obsidian hall of 900 conquered banners, and let the small blue world burn in the air above him as a hologram. He had ruled for 240 years. He had broken the Tessari hegemony. He had hung the Skylords of Myra from their own spires. He had taught the galaxy that the Empire did not negotiate with infants and did not forgive insults. A nursery world had eaten 2 of his ships. A nursery world had taken a captain alive. By dawn, his decision was made. He summoned First Admiral Hessen of the Iron Fleet, a fleet that had not sailed in 80 years because there had been nothing in the galaxy worth sailing it against, and gave a single order, in a voice quiet enough to peel the gold from the walls. "Erase them!" The Iron Fleet emerged from subspace at the edge of the Sol system 9 days later. 400 warships, 12 dreadnoughts, A flagship, the Endless Crown, whose primary cannon could crack a small moon. The light of their arrival turned night into noon on every planet in the system. And the humans were waiting. Not hiding, not fleeing. Waiting in a loose, asymmetrical formation that the Empire's tacticians could not parse, behind the orbits of their outer planets, with their ugly little ships arranged in patterns that violated every principle of fleet warfare the Empire had ever codified. Admiral Hessen looked at the formation through his command viewer and felt, for the first time in his long career, a small, quiet doubt. Then he crushed it, because he had been an admiral too long to permit such things, and he gave the order to advance. The first volley of the Empire's long-range cannons crossed the system in 11 minutes. It hit nothing. The humans had moved, not evasively, predictively. They had begun moving before the volley was fired, on a curve that suggested they had calculated not just the trajectory but the intention of the shot. The Empire's gunners reloaded, the humans reorganized. And then, from a cluster of asteroids the Imperial scanners had marked as inert debris, 1,000 small, fast, terribly cheap objects ignited their drives at once. Missiles, crude by Imperial standards. Chemical-fueled, dumb-guided, worth less than the meals served on the Endless Crown. There were 100,000 of them. The humans had been building them for months. The humans had been seeding them for months, scattered through every orbit, every Lagrange point, every shadow the Empire scouts had missed because the Empire scouts had assumed there was nothing worth hiding. The first wave broke on the Iron Fleet's shields and accomplished almost nothing. The second wave hit the same shields in the same places at the same instant, and the shields began to flicker. The third wave punched through. Hessen watched a dreadnought die. It did not explode in a single grand flash. It came apart in pieces, the way a body comes apart, slowly, with a kind of stunned dignity, and the humans were already firing the fourth wave before its pieces had cooled. Then the human ships closed. They were small, they were ugly. They were built for atmosphere as much as space, with stubby wings and pitted hulls and weapons that should not have worked at this range. They came in screaming, broadcasting on every Imperial frequency at once, not threats, not demands, but music, a chaotic torrent of every song humanity had ever recorded, played at full volume into the void as if to say, "We are not afraid of your silence." The Iron Fleet's formation collapsed in 19 minutes. The Endless Crown fired her primary cannon once. The shot vaporized a human carrier and 7,000 human lives, and Hessen saw, on his command screen, the exact moment the humans adjusted, saw the way their entire fleet pivoted around the loss without slowing, without hesitating, the way a body keeps walking after a wound because there is still ground to cover. A human boarding torpedo struck the Endless Crown amidships, then another, then 12. Hessen ordered retreat. The order was relayed. The order was acknowledged. The order was too late. In the throne chamber, 300 light-years away, Emperor Vaskarun watched his flagship die in real time through the eyes of a single surviving observation drone. He watched a human in scarred armor walk onto the Endless Crown's command deck. He watched her step over the body of his first admiral. He watched her look directly into the drone's lens, as if she knew he was watching, as if she had arranged for him to be watching, and speak 2 words in a language his translator had to think about before it understood. "Your move!" The recording leaked within an hour. The Empire had not meant to release it. The Empire had, in fact, ordered every copy destroyed and every witness silenced. But the humans had been broadcasting throughout the battle, and the humans had not stopped broadcasting after, and somewhere in the chaos, a subject species, one of the 900, caught the signal on a smuggled receiver and could not unhear what it had heard. By the next sunrise on 1,000 worlds, every oppressed species in the galaxy had seen the same 2 words, spoken by the same scarred human commander standing on the corpse of a dreadnought. "Your move!" On the Tessari mining colonies, where the workers had not been allowed to look at the sky for a generation, someone scratched the human commander's silhouette into the wall of a barracks. The guards beat the artist to death. By morning, there were 100 more silhouettes on 100 more walls. On Myra, where the Skylords had been hung from their own spires and replaced with imperial governors, the children began drawing small blue planets in their schoolbooks. The teachers tried to erase them. The children drew more. On the homeworld of the Veltka, the same junior technician who had detected the signal, now 100 days older and 10,000 years wiser. An old grandmother took down the imperial banner from her window and put up, in its place, a piece of cloth she had dyed blue with berries from her garden. She did not know why. She did not need to. In the throne chamber, Emperor Vascarun read the intelligence reports and understood, with a clarity that felt like cold water, that he had not lost a fleet. He had lost a story. The Empire had ruled for 10,000 years on a single story. We are inevitable. The humans had taken that story in 19 minutes and replaced it with another. They can be hurt. And once a story like that was loose, no fleet in the galaxy could shoot it down. His advisors gathered. They proposed options. A second fleet. A third, bioweapons. A strike on the human homeworld using hidden assets the Empire had been saving for true existential threats. The Emperor listened to all of it with the patience of a man already drowning and watching the water rise. When they were done, he asked one question. Where are the humans now? There was a long silence. The answer, when it came, was given by his youngest advisor, a thin, shaking, brilliant young Vorthan named Isru, who had been promoted because all of his superiors had been executed. "Sir," Isru said, "they are not on Earth anymore." The Emperor closed his eyes. "Where," he said softly, "are they?" Isru swallowed. "Sir, our long-range monitors detected human jump signatures 3 days ago. Multiple signatures, coordinated. They have been moving through subject space for the last 72 hours. Moving toward what? Sir, they are not moving toward anything in particular. They are moving toward everything." He activated the strategic display. The map of the Empire bloomed in the air, 900 worlds, 10,000 years of conquest, a great gold lattice of held space, and across it in red were small bright marks. Each mark was a place where humans had appeared. Each mark was a place where an imperial garrison had gone silent. Each mark was a place where a subject species had stopped sending tribute and started, instead, sending requests for weapons. There were 41 marks. There had been 12 when the meeting started. The Emperor stared at the map for a long time. Then he turned to his oldest advisor, a war priest named Tal, who had served 3 emperors and seen every kind of empire-killing event the galaxy could produce. "Tal," he said, "what is this?" The old priest looked at the map. He looked at the spreading red. He looked at the small, scarred face of the human commander, frozen on a side screen, still saying your move in silent loop. "My emperor," he said quietly, "this is not a war." "Then what is it?" Tal bowed his head. "This is a verdict." The human commander's name was Marin Okhafer. She was 39 years old, born in Lagos, trained in 3 militaries, fluent in 5 languages and 1 dead one. She had buried a brother in Mars Regolith and a daughter in Pacific saltwater, and she had not slept a full night in 11 years. She was now, by the rough consensus of a species that did not entirely agree on anything, the closest thing humanity had to a fleet admiral. She did not want the job. She did the job anyway. That was, she had come to understand, the entire human condition compressed into a sentence. Her flagship, a converted asteroid mining vessel renamed the Lagos, because someone had to be named Lagos, and it might as well be her, moved through imperial space at the head of a coalition that should not have existed. There were human ships in her formation. There were Tessari ships, freshly liberated, their hulls still bearing the burn marks of slave collars. There were Murran skiffs flown by the children of the hung Skylords. There were Vorthan defectors. Yes, Vorthan, the Empire's own species. Flying captured corvettes with their imperial insignia clumsily painted over. The Empire had ruled by making everyone afraid of each other. Marin was simply giving them something else to be afraid of together. World by world, the coalition advanced. They did not bombard, they did not raise. They arrived in orbit, opened a single channel, and broadcast the same message in the local tongue. The empire ends here. We are not your new masters. We are your ride home. Some garrisons fought, most did not. The ones that fought were destroyed with the same surgical, exhausted efficiency the humans had brought to every problem in their history. The ones that surrendered were disarmed and, to their continuing astonishment, fed. The Empire counterattacked twice. The first counterattack failed because the humans had spent 2 months seeding the approach lanes with the same cheap, dumb, terrifying missiles that had broken the Iron Fleet. The second failed because 3 subject species, given weapons for the first time in 3 generations, turned those weapons not on the humans but on the Imperial commanders standing behind them. By the end of the second month, the Empire's command structure was eating itself. Generals executed admirals. Admirals executed governors. Governors fled. In the throne chamber, Emperor Vascarun watched his empire dissolve and felt, for the first time in 240 years, the small, dry sensation of being outlived. He summoned Tull. "Old friend," he said, "tell me how to stop this." The war priest considered the question for a long time. "My emperor," he said at last, "you cannot stop a verdict. You can only choose how to receive it. Surrender, then. It is what I would advise." The emperor laughed, a dry, cracked sound that surprised them both. "Surrender to a species that did not exist in any meaningful sense when I took this throne. To a commander whose grandmother's grandmother was not yet born when I crushed the Tessari. To children." "They are not children, my emperor." "No." Vascarun looked at his hands. They were the hands of a very old being. "No, they are not." He thought about it through the long night. He thought about the 900 banners on his walls. He thought about the way the small blue world had looked in the hologram on the night he gave the order to erase it. He thought about Drevan's face, "They wanted one of us alive," and about the human commander on the deck of the Endless Crown, and about the children on Myra drawing small blue planets in their books. By morning, he had made his choice. He would not surrender. He would not flee. He would meet the human fleet at the gates of his capital with the full weight of the Imperial Guard, and he would die on his throne if that was what the verdict required, because he had been emperor for 240 years, and he did not know how to be anything else. He sent the order to mobilize. The Imperial Guard, the last fleet, the loyal fleet, the fleet that had never once been used because nothing in the galaxy had ever justified its use, began to wake. And then, 6 hours before the Guard could complete its muster, Marin Ockhafer's coalition appeared in the skis of the capital. The Emperor stood at his chamber window and watched them come. There were thousands of them. Human, Tessari, Murren, Vorthan, dreadnoughts beside skiffs beside repurposed mining barges. 100 banners, none of them gold, none of them his, fluttering on the long-range scopes. At the head of the formation, the Lagos opened a channel. The Emperor accepted it with a gesture that felt, suddenly, very small. Marin Ockhafer's face filled the screen. She looked tired. She looked sad. She looked, the Emperor realized with a jolt, kind in the careful, terrible way of people who had decided to be kind on purpose against all available evidence. "Emperor Vascarun," she said, "my name is Marin. We need to talk." The negotiations were held in the throne chamber because the Emperor insisted, and because Marin, who had learned by now that symbols cost nothing and bought a great deal, agreed. She walked into the obsidian hall alone. No guards, no weapons. She wore the scarred armor she had worn on the deck of the Endless Crown, and her hair was grayer than it had been 3 months before, and she carried in one hand a small object wrapped in cloth. The Emperor sat on his throne. He had dressed in the full regalia of his office, all 900 sigils, because if he was going to be judged, he intended to be judged as what he was. His advisors stood in a half-circle behind him. Tull, the old war priest, was at his right hand. Marin stopped at the foot of the dais. She looked up at him for a long moment. The Emperor had been looked at by many beings in his long life, fearfully, hatefully, worshipfully, hungrily, and he had thought he knew every shape a look could take. He had never been looked at like this. as if she had already forgiven him and was waiting only to find out whether he could forgive himself. "I have terms," she said. "I expected you would. They are not what your advisors think." The Emperor inclined his head slightly. "Speak them." Marin took a breath. "The Empire ends. Not the Vorthan people, the Empire. Your subject species are released. Their tribute is forgiven. Their stolen lands and stolen children and stolen names are returned to them where any of those things still exist to be returned. The fleets are decommissioned. The throne is dissolved. And in exchange, Marin said, "you live." There was a long silence in the chamber. One of the advisors made a small, involuntary sound. Tull, the old priest, closed his eyes as if in prayer. The Emperor stared at her. "You could destroy us," he said. "You have the fleet, you have the will, you have, by every measure I can apply, the right. Why are you offering me my life?" Marin considered the question. She seemed, for a moment, very young, younger than her 39 years, younger than the war, younger than the weight she was carrying. "Because we have done this before," she said quietly. "Not to you, to ourselves. We have spent 10,000 years winning wars and then deciding what to do the morning after, and the only thing we have ever learned, the only thing is that the morning after is when you find out what kind of people you really are." She unwrapped the small object in her hand. It was a child's drawing, pencil on cheap paper. A small blue planet ringed by clumsy stars, and beside it a small gray one, the Emperor's homeworld, recognizable by the curve of its great inland sea, and between them, in shaky letters, 3 words in the imperial tongue. "We are neighbors." "A Murran child gave this to me," Marin said, "3 weeks ago. On a world your governors had ruled for 90 years. I asked her why she drew it. She said she didn't know any other way to ask. She placed the drawing on the lowest step of the dais. I am not here to end you, Emperor. I am here to end the story you have been telling. And then I am going home because I have been away too long and there are people there I have not yet learned how to grieve." She turned to leave. The Emperor's voice stopped her at the door. "Commander Ockhefer." She paused. "What are you?" he asked. It was the same question he had asked 3 months and 10,000 years ago, on the night he first heard the word human. "Truly, what is your species? I have ruled this galaxy for 240 years, and I have never seen what you are." Marin thought about it. "We're a species," she said, "that has spent its entire existence being the most dangerous thing in any room we walked into. And we got tired of it. We got tired, Emperor. So we decided a little while ago to try being something else. We're not very good at it yet, but we're practicing." She left. The Emperor sat on his throne for a long time after the door closed. The drawing lay on the step where she had placed it. After a while, Tull, old, tired, finally allowed to be tired, picked it up and brought it to him. The Emperor held it in his ancient hands and looked at the small blue planet, and the small gray planet, and the 3 shaky words between them. Then, for the first time in 240 years, he wept. Far away, on a world that had until recently been called a curiosity, and was now called nothing in particular by anyone who mattered, an old grandmother took down a piece of blue cloth from her window and folded it carefully into a drawer. Because the war was over and the cloth could rest now. And in the deepest archive of the galaxy, an old alien philosopher, older than the Empire, older than the Vorthans, old enough to remember when the stars themselves had been strangers, wrote the final entry in the long record of what had happened. He wrote only 1 line. "We thought we had found a new species. We had found a verdict. And then, astonishingly, against all precedent, against the long dark grain of the galaxy itself, we had found a mercy." He closed the book. Outside his window, the stars were the same stars they had always been. But the galaxy beneath them was, for the first time in 10,000 years, new. The end.